Yes. Wow. Well, happy Earth Week, Paradigm Shifters. I'm so blessed to be living here and to have everything that's, wow, this is home. And like I'm looking at it, like, how am I taking care of it? What am I doing this week? I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Paradigm Shifters, we are a global community now of shifters and uplifters. How's that for you, Katie? You like that little rhyme? Yeah, right now, as of like Earth Week, we are 937 members strong from 27 plus countries. And we're growing and growing and growing in awareness of the shift and uplift. You know, we can shift and downlift, but like here we're uplifting. And it's my so pleasure to welcome everyone here, but mostly it's my pleasure, deep pleasure, to welcome my friend, my friend Katie Augustine here. Oh my God, Katie and I met years and years ago, and one thing that I'm like, Earth Week, oh, Earth Week, who can we have? Well, Katie Augustine, of course. Katie Augustine, when I think of the earth, the environment, and everything, your face and your aura pops up.
Hmm. Thank
So before we get going, let me tell these people a little bit of bio about you. How does that sound?
you. Sounds good. Thanks,
I'm
Judy.
so excited. I'll tell you what, there's so many people who are so excited to hear you speak today.
Thank you. Well, it's my honor to be here.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, okay,
invite.
so Katie's an attorney, an ordained minister of walking prayer, breathwork facilitator, and life mastery consultant. Now, Katie is currently serving as a senior life coach with the Brave Thinking Institute. She's been a self proclaimed environmentalist, aka earth and animal advocate, her entire adult life, and she writes what she calls social commentary poetry. All views today are her own, so I would love to bring Katie on and just, you know, uh, tell us a little bit about how, when you were a kid, what is it that sparked in you? So I'm turning this whole thing over to you, Katie Augustine. So proud of you.
Oh, Judy. Thank you, Judy. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned, and thank you for mentioning how, when we met and the aura that I have, because I feel like you're my animal advocate compadre here in this lifetime, and especially our elephant love. So we'll later in the call, I can share a little bit about an elephant story that I thought you would really appreciate, Judy. So yeah, I can start, as a kid, it's kind of subtle, but what I do remember is sitting in my backyard. We had a backyard with some trees around it and a little bit of a wooded area, and I would sit on my swing set, which was kind of tucked into that area, and I felt like I was communing with the birds and the trees. It was just a very, subtle, but it was very natural. I mean, we're kids, so I think we're, as children, for many of us, we maybe felt more open and more connected. Now, I did not grow up with environmentalist parents or community or anything like that necessarily, but I definitely felt that connection. And the other story as a child that it's a little bittersweet, but it actually does bring in kind of bittersweet aspects of being an environmentalist and wanting to make a difference and personally wanting to make a difference, and yet knowing that, seeing sometimes how big the story is, right? And how do we hold the vision and take our steps while, there's some things outside of ourselves, the conditions outside of ourselves that we can't necessarily control. So in this case, as a kid, this is a very simple story. I had a rock collection and I loved these rocks. Yeah. And I just had them all in a bucket, like a white bucket. They were in the backyard in the garden. And I mean, I had some rocks with fossils. I loved these rocks. And then my mom, not knowing how special they were to me, one day just tossed them. She got She, yeah, got rid of them. And she always says she feels so bad to this day, not knowing that that was so important to me, of course. They were just to her, a pile of rocks, right? But I think that also, even though that story is a little bittersweet, it helps remind us of relating to all sentient beings, right? And that everything's energy, that there's an aliveness in the rocks and in the trees and in the rivers and the spirits. And I'm sure, even though at the time I was just sad, I'm sure some of that led me, to where I am today, and through the years in finding my path and my way. And then of course, self-proclaiming myself as an environmentalist and trying to spread the message in these various avenues. So
One thing that I remember, I think it was last year, when the fires were happening in California, and Katie's out there like, put buckets of water out there, the animals are afraid. And it was like very specific, because there were those of us, at least me, that were so into like my own thing, and you brought to mind, hey,
yeah.
there's animals, and you had very specific things to do. So tell us more a little bit about that, and how you even know those things.
Well, yeah, Judy, this is, and paradigm shifters. Part of it is because I'm friends with a lot of people in California. So I was seeing their posts, and a lot of my friends in California are either ministry sisters and brothers, or and in the ministry that I am part of is we studied with indigenous elders, we studied transpersonal psychology, and did vision quests and sweat lodges and things that are very basically, we were learning to be one with the land and with the animals. And I really learned, actually, through that ministry program, learned that the earth, and it's not the earth, the trees, the waters, they're not a commodity. They're not just our resources at our disposal. That as the Western approach is really entitlement, and we just take, and again, this commodity mindset. And yet, in a lot of the tribes around the world, you mentioned that we're a global paradigm shifter community here. Tribes around the world really, culturally saw the earth and the trees as our relatives and as our ancestors. And so part of my learning over the years was going through that program. But then, as I mentioned, there's these bittersweet moments of, having these cravings to change things, and yet seeing, kind of the industrial, governmental, not just one government, global governmental, and then not just governments, but large industry. And so where do we fit in? What do we do? And so for a lot of my adult life, and especially after my ministry program, just kind of trying to find my way, and then helping, hopefully helping others say, oh yeah, there's something I can do. I'd like to find my way too, instead of being in, kind of to your point, Judy, around the fires, instead of sitting in despair. Not that it doesn't break our hearts sometimes that these things are happening, but also, wait a minute, there is something I can do. There's a step I can take to help. If it's putting out a bucket of water when the animals are fleeing, if it's day to day, praying over a tree, planting a tree, not cutting the grass as often so the bees have dandelions. What I mean? There's a number of different things, and we can get into that in a minute, Judy. But where I'm at is really, what steps can I take myself and as a community and collaboration, and sharing the message with others, because there always are steps to take, even though it sometimes seems up until now bigger than us. Does that answer your question, Judy?
Absolutely. And you came back to that, what steps can I take to do that? Boy, you meant not cutting your grasses off, and like that would have never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Well,
Something those are so simple.
yeah. Well, it's the paradigm, right? Like, this is why it's really interesting to look at our paradigms and our belief systems, right? And so, I look at the neighborhood I'm in. It's a very kind of cookie cutter neighborhood, and I mean, if you saw how much time people spend on their yards and their grass and the fertilizer and the weeding and the hedging and the trimming, and yet that's a paradigm, a belief. It's not, I'm not saying good or bad or judging as much as, and I mean, of course, we want it to look nice and presentable at to some degree. But ultimately, there's a whole nother group of, really a lot of our younger generations are saying, oh my gosh, let's let the weeds grow. Let's let the dandelions grow. We need the bees, right? And so it's paradigms, and it's about shifting them and starting to pay attention to, why did we have these beliefs? Why did we make it okay? And how do we start saying, well, now this is the new normal. So
Oh, I love it. And it's in every person's individual choice
yeah.
to look at that. I just, when you said that, a light bulb went off because I've been on this quest of wildflowers lately
Oh, nice.
and out and finding the different wildflowers of Texas. And they're not in the neighborhoods. They're out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also like, is it a weed or is it a flower?
Mhm.
So this questions all the time. So the paradigm, I love that you brought that up because I guess we are paradigm shifters. What is it? How would you? What would you suggest that we ask ourselves as far as maybe the environment and stuff goes? Like, I know there's so many questions that come in. Oh my god! But what are some specific questions that you would?
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it?
I love that. I love thinking about that. So what do I ask? So I think, Judy, for me, day to day, it's um it's little steps I can take. So maybe the question is, what are the steps I can take that would make a difference? And it may be, one of the things, my family, I drive them crazy during the holidays. I'm the eclectic auntie, that is, as people are unwrapping their gifts, I'm collecting the tissue paper and the bags and trying, instead of it all going in the garbage, recycling it. But then I end up with all these, things that I mean, I love to give gifts, but I don't give that many. But it's this idea of, what, again, a paradigm of, okay, when I give a gift, it has to be wrapped and ornate and all this tissue paper. It's the question is, what are little steps I can take to start reducing my own carbon footprint, so to speak, and then sharing the message with others. So another example is when people are idling, especially in my neighborhood, like I live on a cul-de-sac, I may go up to them and I'll nicely, I wouldn't suggest doing this unless you're kind of, uh, so I guess there could be a danger in this, but up until now, I just tend to nicely say, hey, do you need something? And they usually say no, they're on their phone or whatever. And unless it's really hot out or really cold out, I'll say, hey, would you mind turning your car off for the environment? It's simple, and almost everyone is like, oh yeah, of course. Like, I mean, so many people have thanked me, but it's these simple ideas that, the idling, just going into the store instead of sitting in a long line for a drive-through, and
Oh my gosh, tell me about that. Oh, busted. I just went through drive-through. Oh my god. I never heard about it. Can you tell me more about? Go ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
just really the idling, and they say anything over a minute in the car. So of course, there's natural idling we're going to do on the highway or at a stoplight. We're not going to, probably most of us aren't going to turn our car on and off for all of those. But I will tell you, if there is ever a drive-through that I have to go through for some reason, sometimes like getting a rental car and having to go through a drive-through, there I will, if I know I'm going to be sitting for a couple minutes, I'll turn the car off. A lot of times, because we're using our phones, we'll try to idle to charge up the phone, or just not even thinking because we're on the phone or pulling up the maps. So the suggestion is just the less we're running the cars, the better. It saves us gas. And then I know with COVID, a lot of people use drive-throughs, and I get it. It's, again, Judy, this is where I think when we ask ourselves these questions, sometimes we're weighing the choices and the consequences. But I think the power is in making the conscious choice, right? Even though sometimes we may choose, okay, it's my daughter's graduation, she's not having a normal year, it sucks for them, so we're going to have a drive rally. Okay, is there an exception? Okay. but going to Starbucks just because I want coffee, and then sitting in a 45-minute line instead of going in and maybe wearing our mask and just going into the store, unless you're immune deficient or something, to me, it's let's go in the store and buy the thing and not idle. So does that answer the idling question?
Gosh, all these light bulbs are going off here. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? I've often heard that word carbon footprint. And you know what? I don't think I've ever understood it. And perhaps that's new to some people who are
Yeah.
watching this. What does that mean?
Well, it's really about it's interesting you asked this, Judy, because I'll just start with a quick story that a friend of mine, not necessarily an environmentalist, he used to joke that he wanted to create the biggest carbon footprint he could, just kind of teasing me in essence. But he asked one day, he came, a bunch of our colleagues at work, he came over and asked, what creates the biggest carbon footprint? And we were all guessing. And of course, being the environmentalist, I've got all these great ideas, and it's an individual for each person, not by industry, but for people. And here, the answer is quite simple if you think about it. It's having children, because then that's a whole nother carbon footprint or more, right? So this isn't about like not having kids, right? However, it is again about these paradigms of, well, wait a minute, in the there's even my own growing up, I didn't end up having children mostly because I didn't meet the right person, not because I didn't want to. But even in those baby bearing era years, noticing how many people, when are you going to get married, when are you going to have kids, like this paradigm of, we have to have children, we have to procreate to be something in the world. And I think it's really just starting to question and ask, everything that I do, every step I take has a carbon footprint, whether it's using, paper, toilet paper, which is the big paper of the year, right? But anything that I do has, in essence, a carbon footprint. My own breath is carbon. So therefore, there's a carbon footprint. My car obviously emits carbon. Every time I fly, there's a carbon aspect to that. And so each of us has our own carbon footprint. The industries, unfortunately, some of the larger industries, have their carbon footprint. And that's where I was going, Judy, earlier with, this kind of these conflicting desires, because I don't know for the paradigm shifters here, but my thought is, we want to take our steps, and yet, so we want to take our steps, and yet it feels sometimes like, how do I do this with industry? And because, so for instance, something I learned about maybe 2 years ago was that there's 100 global companies across the globe, 100 large global companies that actually emit 71, the last time I looked, it was 71% of our carbon emissions. And so, yeah, I'm just going to breathe that in, right? Not breathe in the oxygen on that, not the carbon. but when you hear statistics like that, and you've been, like, for someone like me, but even if you've been interested in helping the environment for a couple of years, or recycling all these years, when you hear stats like that, it's sometimes, and I know I have a lot of friends that are like, I just don't even know what to do, I don't do anything because it's so overwhelming. And it can be overwhelming because, no matter, it feels like sometimes no matter what we do, how there's 100 companies emitting 71% of the carbon on the planet. So again, I believe, though, it's about staying conscious, visioning what we would love, envisioning a green planet, right, with as many children as we want, but in these regenerative, sustainable ways of life. Eating less meat, creating non-animal produced meat and products. And then so we hold whatever each of our vision is for that planet, and then we take our steps, and then we know that ultimately things will change. We call our politicians if we have to, and just emphasize that we would like something different. And I get it, it's easy to get caught in that kind of overwhelm of these, ultimately the larger picture. But nothing changes when nothing changes. So it's
Oh,
got
I
to
love
start
it.
somewhere, right?
I love that. Nothing changes unless nothing change unless something changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what I would love to have you do now, this has been fascinating. We can go on for hours and hours, but we talked about one, you reading a poem that also you have an elephant story.
Yes.
So
So,
whatever order you would love to do that, and
Judy, can I mention a couple environmental
oh
orgs?
my
Maybe.
gosh, sure. And you know what? Um, I know you're going to text me that, and I will definitely put it down in the thing. But go for it right
Well,
now.
the one I wanted to mention that because it's Earth Week that I thought people would be interested in. I watched. I mean, last year, of course, with COVID, a lot of us were home and and trying to find programs on Zoom. So they were running all I think for 3 or 4 days around Earth Day, and I believe they're going to do it again. It's called EarthDay.org, and
Okay.
and then you just look up in their site Earth Day Live 2021, and they will have people from all around the globe, environmental specialists, again, indigenous folks speaking to their end of the environment, and then all sorts of musicians and just so many people that are rooting for the planet. This is the 51st Earth Day, so just really
51st.
celebrate that. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, great. So I'm going to look Earth Day Live 2021.
Yes, yes. And then there's maybe I do give you the list, Judy, because I have so many others that are so good.
Oh, you're such a plethora of idea. It's a new
But,
word for me.
yeah.
Great. Well, oh, I'm so excited. I love Earth Day. I saw a little, what do you call those? The gifts, whatever, that said, if you can't hug a person, go hug a tree.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Treehugger.org is a great group. They send out a daily email. Just since you mentioned it.
Wow. Well, tell us the elephant story, and then I would love to have you read your poem, and
Okay,
then we'll
okay.
wrap this up. I love it.
I'm gonna do it in the inverse. Okay, so
Sure.
okay, so the poem it kind of shows this again from my own work with this and how to hold the vision and yet feel the conflict of so many things. So but also taking those steps. So it's called and I also this is also part of I would say a woman kind of coming of age poem as well. There's a little bit of that in here, so some of you may appreciate that. It's called Resisting Resurrection. So, and I'm reading it, so I'm not looking directly at you, but just give me a minute for this, okay? Um, Resisting Resurrection. Sappy, soupy songs of my soul. I want to save the world. Reaching, yearning, burning, urgent desires like a teenage boy's dreams. So I boycott Walmart. I save cats, duplex, and I scream at others' ignorance. All the while wondering, what would the girl living in the tree scream at me? Searing, seizing, screaming in my soul. Security seems sacred, or is it scared? Perhaps it's my purpose that's divine. Fighting, resisting, capsizing. I go down with conflicting desires, only hopeful to rise again. And Judy, I wrote that in November of 2004, and I dedicated that to Butterfly, who was the woman who lived in that tree, if you recall, many years ago. So just dedicated that to her, knowing that here's this woman willing to live in a tree. I think it was I don't remember the exact time, maybe over a year. I mean, it was quite a feat, and here I was, just trying to go through my day to day. And when I say duplex in there, by the way, that meant print on both sides. That was the old version. Now it just will say, do you want to print on both sides of paper? So, but being in the legal world at that time, we would print volumes of paper. And if I could duplex, that would save a tree.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me the elephant story.
Yeah. So at the end of that poem, we talk about being hopeful to rise again. And I do believe that to me, that's where we're at, right? This idea of how do we rise again and treat our planet like instead of the resource like a relative, treat the animals instead of a resource like a relative. Uh, and then again create the vision and come from it, as you and I have been taught from one of our favorite mentors, Mary Morrissey. But really with this idea of I can take my steps. I can't change necessarily what everyone else is doing, but I can take my steps, and eventually enough of us will create that tipping point. And when I think about the earth, the rivers, the waters, the elephants, all the animals, reptiles, the little creepy crawlers, right, and the finned ones and the winged ones, I just think about how they just live. They're in harmony. They live in harmony with each other. There's cycles of life, but they're in harmony with each other. And as humans, right now, up until now, we're the ones that are kind of, not in that flow of harmony. But to start remembering, I heard a great quote a few weeks ago that the earth, the climate crisis, it's not really the problem, it's the symptom. And it's the symptom of us not realizing that we are one with nature, that without nature and us being one versus separate, and again, that entitlement, that's actually part of this whole evolutionary period that still can really go in a number of directions. We're all holding for the best. But so anyway, as a really good story that I know Judy, you being a lover of elephants, will love. And again, it's a little bit of a bittersweet story, but I think it shows how animals know that we're all one, right? They get that. And so it's going back to 2003, I believe it was, the Indonesian tsunami, that many of us remember. That kind of just, it was right around the holidays, I believe. It was just this kind of very sad event where over, I think, 300,000 people perished in that tsunami, and whole towns, there was a bridge that ended up going to nowhere after the tsunami. Just whole towns were gone. And but I read this article that I'll never forget, just absolutely beautiful article about the elephants during that tsunami, and in certain areas where they were chained because they were used in Indonesia and different places, used as kind of working elephants, working animals, and chained for years. Not necessarily, most of the time we learn that elephants, you can chain them with big chains and then eventually a river reed, but they think they're chained up. Well, during the tsunami, as the waters were coming in and carrying people out, these elephants broke out of their chains. And I know it's a little, and they would walk into the water and let people climb on them and bring them out and go back in and get people, right? And bring them out, bring them back to land. And to think about, they know that we're relatives, right? I mean, you think of your dog, your cat, pigs are so, know that we're relatives. And so, is there a way that we can all just start, remembering that as we are working and treating, working with the animals, working with the land, the waters, truly, it's just, I think that's a great story to end with. I know it's a little bittersweet, but it just reminds me of the power of nature and harmony, and what I believe a lot of us would like to get back to.
Oh, thank you so much. There, you got me
I
going.
know, I know, I know. That's why I asked you to let me get some Kleenex at the beginning of
Uh,
my.
every good talk ends with some tears, because when your heart's open, right, your eyes leak. Yeah. So one one final question, and this is what uh, we ask whoever takes the time to come out and pour their passion with us. As a global community of shifters and uplifters, we would love to ask you, Katie Augustine, what it is we can hold for you,
Oh,
and what would you love for us as a community holding for you, because you obviously are a light leader
mm.
for our planet. And what can we hold for you to
Oh,
uplift you?
thanks, Judy. Thank you for that. That is awesome. I think it's just to continue to share this type of message to communities like yours, right? To communities of paradigm shifters in whatever form those look like, but to continue to share a message of hope, and that, again, we can each take our steps. Every one of us has a carbon footprint that, has consequences to it. And yet we can start to reduce and reverse that individually, and then collectively, as we kind of, in essence, start to make it known what we would love. And so with again, the government, the leaders of industry, et cetera, we're divesting. The young generations really get this. They're on digital boycotts and online divesting all from any banks that are, invested in fossil fuels, et cetera. But I think the key is, Judy, for me personally, I would love it if you could all hold that I can share the message in a very positive light, so that it helps others be positive as we take our steps. And then eventually, that as a collective, we do create that tipping point, so we can really help the earth go back to, humanity living in harmony with all sentient beings and with the planet herself. So thank you for that.
Okay, so you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. All right, paradigm shifters, and we're sending this up to Cleveland, Ohio, I think, right? Here you go. Get ready to catch it, Katie. Get ready to catch. Whoosh.
Oh,
And so it is.
and so
And
it
so we let it be. Thank you so much. This has been such a blessing. I feel so blessed and blissed out.
I'm
So
so
thank you so much for
glad.
coming in here. I so appreciate you, Katie.
Well, Judy and Paradigm Shifters, it's completely my honor to be with you today. And again, blessings and love to each and every one of you.
Amen.